Anyone who is afraid of exploring their sexuality is afraid of finding out who they really are. That's a heavy statement, isn't it? It suggests that sexuality isn't just some side note in our lives, some trivial thing we can ignore. No, it's deeply woven into who we are, and being afraid to explore it, well, that means we're afraid of our own identity. Think about it. Sexuality is a fundamental part of the human experience. It's not just about attraction or intimacy, it's about understanding desires, orientations, and expressions that shift and evolve over time. But why are people so afraid to explore it? Culture, religion, society, they all have a way of whispering, no, shouting into our ears, telling us what's acceptable and what isn't. Curiosity gets labeled as deviant, experimentation gets dismissed as confusion, and then there's fear. Fear of judgment, of rejection, of change. It's easier to push those thoughts aside, to conform, to stay within the lines. But ignoring it, that doesn't make it go away. It just buries it deeper, turning it into something that festers, something unresolved. How many people live their entire lives suppressing their exploration because they're too afraid of what they might find, too afraid of what others might think? But the other part of the quote is what really hits me, is afraid of finding out who they really are. It's not just about sexuality anymore, it's about identity. And identity isn't just about labels, is it? It's emotional, psychological, spiritual. Our sexual preferences, our attractions, they reflect deeper truths about us. What we want, what we fear, what we value. Avoiding exploration. It's like avoiding a mirror. You know it's there, but you don't want to look because you might not like what you see. But at what cost? Anxiety, dissatisfaction, living a life that's not fully yours, pretending to be something you're not. And I think about existentialism, about Sartre and his whole idea of bad faith, deceiving yourself to fit in rather than facing who you are. Is that what we're doing when we shy away from exploring our sexuality? Are we living in bad faith, hiding from the truth because it feels safer to stay in the dark? Simone de Beauvoir talked about freedom, about transcending the roles society imposes on us. But how do you transcend something that's been drilled into your mind since childhood? How do you step outside of it without feeling like you're betraying everything you've been taught? And then there's Foucault, who argued that society defines what's acceptable, what's normal. We internalize those expectations so deeply that even questioning them feels wrong. But why should it? Why should exploring something as natural as sexuality feel like an act of rebellion? Even from a psychological standpoint, it makes sense. Maslow's hierarchy of needs, self-actualization is at the top, right? You can't reach that peak without embracing every part of yourself, including the parts that scare you. Carl Jung would probably call it the shadow self, the parts of us we repress out of fear or shame. But those shadows, they don't disappear just because we ignore them. So what's the solution? How do we move past this fear? Maybe it starts with self-acceptance, with creating spaces where exploration is normal, where it's okay to ask questions without fear of judgment. Maybe it's about realizing that society's rules about sexuality are often arbitrary, shaped by cultures and beliefs that have nothing to do with who we really are. And change, it's inevitable. Sexuality is fluid for so many people. It's not something static that you can put in a neat little box. Exploration doesn't mean losing yourself. It means understanding yourself better. It means growth. Maybe the real takeaway here is that self-discovery isn't a one-time thing. It's ongoing. And sexuality, it's a big part of that journey. Maybe the truest way to live authentically is to embrace every facet of ourselves, to stop being afraid of what we might find. Because in the end, knowing who you are, truly knowing, is worth the risk. So I'll leave you with this. What are you really afraid of? Is it the fear of being different? Or is it the fear of being real?